Hello, hope you're doing well today. Today we are talking about Chapter 14. This is Sustainability and Legacy. So here we go. So our objectives are to demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of the immediate and long-term impacts or legacies, if you will, of events, as well as to account for and give consideration to the numerous and integrative infrastructures and developments that can accompany the hosting of medium and small scale events, and capitalize on the economic, social, emotional, the promotional, and capital benefits, all the OLs and Ls, to be derived from the proper management of medium and small scale events. And so here we go. Legacy is a term we generally use to describe the longer term benefits and consequences of hosting a major sports event. Event legacy should be considered as being a combination of planned or unplanned events. And so many sport major events now have plans or strategies to maximize their chances of securing positive and sustainable outcomes through the hosting of events. But there's often still room for other unplanned or unintended outcomes to occur through the hosting of major sport events. The positive or the negative. While we hope that the hosting of major sport events is positive for all stakeholders involved, there are still chances where stakeholders might be negatively affected through the hosting of events in both the short and long term. The major sport event research also shows us how these events affect different people in different ways, and where an outcome might be perceived positively by some stakeholders, others might not share the same perspective. The tangible or intangible. These are legacies you can see and touch, of course, the tangible, like the sport facilities and infrastructure, and some of them you can't see or touch, the intangibles, even though you know they are there, like the increased sense of community and feelings of belonging you experience as a participant, volunteer, or spectator. More recent research has also highlighted that event legacies are contextual, as each major event is hosted in a different city at a different time and organized by a different team of people. No two events will deliver the same legacies. They can also be temporal. While a major sport event might provide a spectacle for 1 to 2 weeks maximum, the overall event life cycle of bidding, planning, delivery, and wrap-up may span between 7 to 10 years. Meaning there are many potential points of activation before, during, and after where a host city and its delivery partners can implement initiatives to secure legacies. The planning for a legacy is the idea of planning, really dedicating resources to the legacy beyond those committed to the delivery of an event, has become increasingly important over the last 2 decades. We have seen major sport event governing bodies and host city governments aim to demonstrate to the tax-paying public that the huge investments in sport events and related infrastructure lead to much broader reaching and longer-term outcomes beyond the couple of weeks of sport and spectacle. In fact, the potential legacies are now a key motivator for potential host cities to bid for major sport events, and event bids are increasingly accompanied by sophisticated plans and dedicated legacy resources to activate the opportunity of an event before, during, and after the couple weeks of sport. The other major intangible benefit of mega events claimed by sports boosters is that of national and international exposure. Sports fans may enjoy their visit to the city and return later, raising future tourist revenue for the area. Corporate visitors, it is claimed, may relocate manufacturing facilities and company headquarters to the city. Television viewers might decide to take a trip to the host city at some time in the future based on what they see during the broadcast of the mega event. Finally, hosting a major event might raise perception of the city so that it becomes a major league or world-class city and travel destination. All of these claims are potential true, although little empirical research has conclusively demonstrated any long-run connections between hosting mega events and future tourism demand. Mega events, also referred to as hallmark or landmark events, are large-scale events intended to renew investment in host cities. usually in the tourism sector, by projecting a positive image of the city. Mega events can be distinguished from smaller events such as routine conferences, celebrations, or sporting events by the tremendous amount of resources. In the case of mega events, the amount of new spending that is new to the economy is thought to be quite large in comparison to the total amount of spending. Since these premier events are thought to attract large audiences from outside the local economy, many of whom come specifically for the event. High prices charged by hotels and other businesses in the hospitality industry also tend to dissuade casual visitors during mega events. A second source of bias is crowding out, which is the congestion caused by the mega event that dissuades regular recreational and business visitors from coming to a city during that time. Many large sporting events are staged in communities that are already popular tourist destinations. If hotels and restaurants in the host city normally tend to be at or near capacity, throughout the time period during which the competition takes place, the contest may simply supplement rather than supplement the regular tourist economy. In other words, the economic impact of a mega event may be large in a gross sense, but the net impact may be small. A third source of bias comes from leakages. While money may be spent in local economies during mega events, this spending may not wind up in the pockets of local residents. The taxes used to subsidize these events, however, are paid for by the local taxpayers. During mega events, however, the economy within a region may be anything but normal, and therefore these same inter-industry relationships may not hold. Since there is no reason to believe that the usual economic multipliers are the same during mega events, any economic analysis based upon these multipliers may therefore be highly inaccurate. There is substantial reason to believe that during mega events, these multipliers are highly overstated, which overestimates the true impact of these events on the local economy. Hotels, for example, routinely raise their prices during mega events to 3 to 4 times their normal rates. The wages paid to a hotel's workers, however, remain unchanged, and indeed, workers may be simply expected to work harder during times of high demand without any additional monetary compensation. As a hotel's revenue increases without a corresponding increase in costs, the return to capital as a percentage of revenue rises while the return to labor falls. Capital income is far less likely to stay within the area in which it is earned than labor income, and therefore one might expect a fall in the multiplier effect during mega events due to these increased leakages. Most league-sponsored economic impact studies not only potentially exaggerate the benefit side of the cost-benefit equation, but also often completely ignore the costs of hosting such an event. Most leagues and event organizers require sparkling new stadiums and arenas before awarding the privilege of hosting a mega event to a city. Another consideration is having these events not during peak time, like for a tourist city. Typically your summers are packed full of your tourists. So you have to consider when a good time to hold these events would be. Medium-sized events host attendees and guests in the low hundreds range, so the personalization of the event is less stringent. But in lieu of this, it becomes more important to provide well-oiled plans with a much more encompassing schedule of events. The type of events may be similar, but everything at this point is scaled up. Event costs and considerations come much earlier in the process than a small event, as mistakes later on could spell disaster for medium to large size events, where losing one aspect of your event in terms of negotiation and pricing could end it before it begins. Small to medium events are defined as those that competitors can outperform the spectators, usually held annually, cause little to media interest, and generate limited economic activity. These characteristics that small and medium-sized events bring together coincide with the dimensions of corporate social responsibility proposed by the literature to measure their perception. Legacy has emerged as an important consideration in the development of mega sport events, or SMEs. Large-scale and mega sport events such as the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup have been more frequently hosted in emerging nations. Bidding and hosting SMEs is considered an object of policy for many emerging nations, with SMEs viewed as key factors in local and national development strategies. This has largely been driven by the assumption that their legacy provides solution to economic, social, cultural, or political challenges. Social development, politics, soft power, and sport for peace, the economics of tourism, image and branding, and infrastructure and urban development and sport development are all in consideration with these SMEs. SME is a fast track to world recognition and reputation development for rising countries, and this is supported by both the political and tourism destination branding. It's actually something that we have here in Corpus Christi. We have a brand new sports commissioner who falls under the visiting Corpus Christi, and so which is there to promote tourism and destination branding. And so the key factors there are they're trying to bring in these events to help boost our again destination branding and tourism dollars. The notion of legacy is considered multifaceted and far-reaching. Beyond the immediate benefits of sporting mega events, many increasingly propose a longer-term focus on building legacies from such events, with legacy being of either a planned or unplanned character, and emphasize the necessity of understanding and assessing the legacies of sporting mega events. Sporting legacy, for example, are sporting facilities and related infrastructure upgrades and an increase in sport participation and support, as well as sponsorship. Urban legacy are changes made to the urban structure of the host city, as well as the development of new urban districts and specialized areas. You also see infrastructural legacy that are networks ranging from transport to telecommunications, which are renovated or developed for a mega event, access routes by air, water, road, or rail, and the modernization of basic services such as water, electricity, and waste treatment. The economic legacy that looks at the changes in the number of permanent jobs created and changes in the unemployment rate, economic investment opportunities, and foreign investment attraction, and small business development and entrepreneurship, as well as the increase in tourists to a host region that stimulates the local economy. You also have social legacy, which is nation building and contribution to national pride, changed perceptions of residents, the education and racial harmony, and environmental awareness. Environmental legacy is looking at the reducing the carbon footprint and integrating greening principles and climate responsiveness. And political legacy, which is the promotion of democracy, human rights, and improved governance, enhancement of capacity within the public sector, improvements in skills in human resource capital in public and private sectors, and interventions by government or non-governmental organizations. You also have image and branding legacy, that destination profiling and host region exposure, setting or changing the image of a host destination and changes in tourist image and reputation and brand marketing for a host region. Legacies can be deliberate or unexpected, all planned and unplanned, positive and negative, concrete and intangible structures generated for and by a sporting event that lasts longer than the event itself, regardless of the time and space in which they are created. For example, there is often little critique of apparent positive legacies, such as investments in world-class facilities that cause exclusion and the redirection of investment from other means of development. Globalization, digitalization, mediatization, and entertainment have turned the Olympic Games and other mega sporting events into multi-billion-dollar projects. While the sport organizations generate huge revenues, the host cities best cover the costs of the events when they create a long-term sustainable legacy. Chapellet promotes the idea that legacy is multifaceted. When Proust defined legacy by looking at 5 dimensions: space, time, tangible and intangible, positive versus negative, and planned and unplanned mega events. Chaplet adds to those 5 the dimensions of territorial, personal, global and local, and sport and non-sport related. It is noteworthy that Chaplet stresses the point that each legacy has to be seen from the perspective of a particular stakeholder. The number of legacies provided by Olympic Games is very large. The consequences of a structural change for people and space occur in different branches, such as sport, culture, health, education, tourism, or the economy. The IOC, or the International Olympic Committee, refers to this as dimensions in which legacies occur. This is another depiction of what it looks like for an overall legacy framework. You have the vision that starts on the left with the city and the national vision fitting into the Olympic game and the host city election. What are the game requirements, and what is the value added for legacy delivery, and what are the political choices, and then the Olympic Games themselves. And so you look at the urban development, the policy and governance, the human development that looks at the skills and knowledge and network, the intellectual property, and social development, the beliefs and behaviors, and environmental enhancement. Those are all structural changes that are left after the games with, you can see, the cities or the people and the consequences associated with that, with the different industries and branches and the quality of life over a period of time. As mentioned a moment ago, the definition of legacy is often cited as planned and unplanned, positive and negative, tangible and intangible structures that are created for and by a sport event, which may remain longer than the event itself, within a specific time and space. This definition is technically better than that of the IOC and refers to the 6 possible structural changes presented. According to this definition, a structural change can be tangible, so the infrastructure, the building, or intangible, which looks at better skilled people, knowledge, and sport governance. However, legacy itself is not the structural change, but is rather the consequence of this change. However, the innovation process and legacy creation often starts with the bidding process up to 9 years before the games. Therefore, the following definition is suggested. Legacy is any outcomes that affect people and or space caused by structural changes that stem from the Olympic Games. For the practical application, this legacy can be translated as A, people or several stakeholders are affected by and or B, the environment, the city and nature. C, the changes associated, whether those are tangible or intangible. And D, caused by the games, often developed indirectly by the games. And then E, the outcome can be neutral, positive, or negative. A negative legacy reminds us that outcomes may be unintentional. The Olympic legacy is the result of a vision and encompasses all the tangible and intangible long-term benefits for people, cities, and territories, and the Olympic movement. These changes affect the space or the nature or city, and therefore directly or indirectly affect the people that live in this environment. Any structural change modifies a location. A modified location is either more or less attractive for activities. Whether the structural changes are tangible or intangible does not matter. The better or worse location changes people's opportunity to achieve new impacts. In other words, a structural change is now in creating a value in use because the new structures are used for new impacts. Chaplet and Königsdorfer et al. Call these consequences, which depending on a better or worse location can be neutral, positive, or negative. Each structural change causes a consequence and thus creates a value. However, the amount of value for someone depends on other people and or firms and or environmental circumstances. Stakeholders increase the value for people that already live in that area. Our environment is in constant change. Logically, legacy as a consequence of structural change for an infinite time is a dynamic concept. That means that structures, consequences of those structures, and stakeholder evaluations change over time, depending on situational characteristics. When stakeholders change or the environmental circumstances change, then the value of co-creation also changes from time to time. To take the above mentioned example, imagine that the club that uses the new stadium gets relegated. Then the legacy changes because the stadium loses its positive value when a stakeholder, the downregulated club, is leaving the network. The structural change can affect people and space at different spatial levels. Some legacies can be individual. Someone uses a learned skill. Or local, the change of living conditions in a previous Olympic village. The national pride increases, or even international, enhanced international recognition or soft power strategies. The other thing to consider is urban development or space. This includes any infrastructure change in the host city, such as the development of transport and mobility infrastructure. In the literature, this is often called urban regeneration, and one of the most often mentioned legacies. Basic urban infrastructure such as housing, water, sanitation, power supply, solid waste disposal, and other public amenities. And advanced urban services and infrastructure such as telecommunications, police stations, enhanced safety and security features, hospitals, smart city grids, hotels, smart buildings, etc., are necessary to improve the quality of a city. The upgraded or new sport venues and parks develop sport opportunities, but also can affect sport when it is used for social, economic purposes after urban regeneration. The consequences of these changes create value, which depends on the context in which stakeholders use it and the co-creation given in the location. For example, a permanent sport venue that is not used for sport, missing co-creation by club, bands, shops, etc., costs money to maintain and thus draws that money from other spending, which makes the consequence negative for most stakeholders, not for those maintaining it because in their context they have a job. However, the non-used venue can become an iconic building, such as the Bird Nests in Beijing 2008. And the consequence is that it provides value when tourism companies, city governmental authorities, and tour operators co-create a tourism place out of the venue. Environmental enhancement or space, again, this addresses any improvement in air and water quality due to low carbon technologies, or at least a minimization of the carbon footprint. The city gets green space, trees are planted, oxygen is produced, and fine dust is reduced. The biodiversity increases, animals get living space. Former industrial land or brown land gets cleaned, and recycling becomes introduced and waste is minimized. Therefore, less resources are used. The consequences of these environmental enhancements create value depending on the context of the stakeholders or the context of the environmental condition. Many cities have built energy efficient and eco-friendly buildings and venues for the Olympic Games. The politics and governance, the people. This includes all changes of laws, any new regulation, the introduction of binding guidelines and policies. Better governance and new organizational structures are also included under the structural change. It can also be the establishment of quality seals and quality control processes, a protection or new organization of property rights and regulations in construction. It can include the protection of human rights, laws to protect the environment or species, and regulations to help the elderly or disabled persons. New policies can help create a new curriculum in schools or programs and guidelines in security practices and evacuation policies. The consequences of changes in policies and governance create value, but again, they depend upon the context in which the stakeholder is addressed by a policy. Thus, a curriculum change to increase school sport increases the value of sport for children. And here, these are just pictures of Olympic villages that have been created for the purpose of the Olympics. And you can see the interconnectivity with the small village and the green spaces that they've created and the infrastructure of the traffic flow to and from the Olympic Village, and just the modernization of facilities, that housing, those types of things that goes along with that. Human development, or the people, for the people, is the structural change that is composed of 3 areas in which individuals can change. New skills to help to generate talent in different fields. Second, someone can attain new knowledge. Some of the skills are connected to knowledge. The Olympic Games also teach knowledge about sports management, media, broadcasting, tourism, and hospitality. People abroad get more knowledge about the host nation and its culture. And someone can establish new contacts, and thus networks are built. These can be among volunteers, diplomatic connections, police forces, sport federations, or tourism providers. The consequences of changes in human resources create value and depend on the context in which the stakeholder needs these skills. A skill that is never used or knowledge about something anyone needs does not lead to any consequence that creates a value. The intellectual property that's associated with people. This structural change takes account of everything that is invented or newly created through the Olympic Games. Innovation can occur in different fields, the materials, technologies, business models, sports entrepreneurship, etc. Inventions can be new designs, brands, visual identity, and artistic activities, such as music and visual arts. They often get developed throughout the ceremonies. The social development for the people. This structural change is related to social development and addresses the beliefs of people and their habits. The change of someone's mind, the beliefs, means that one thinks differently about racism, peace, females participating in sport, foreigners, environment, public transportation, national identity, etc. Here we can also include the often investigated event feel-good factor. And soft power. The feel-good and soft power are changes of the mind of respondents because they start to see and feel things differently. Then the change of a habit is caused by a change of a belief, but this is not necessarily so. The Olympic Games can change a habit of using public transportation because its availability improves, but one may not stop the habit for a changed belief about environmental protection. Other changes in habits can be the undertaking of more sports, no littering, and reading more sports news. And this is just one of our small to medium type events that we have here in Corpus Christi, Buck Days, that's coming up here May 14th through the 4th through the 14th. They've got many events going on, an air show, they have their carnival and things along that line to bring, again, tourism to Corpus Christi. In recent times, the concept of benchmarking has been advocated as a tool for improving management within the sport industry. Benchmarking has been considered as a good method of identifying the factors that lead to international sporting success. Underpinning the benchmarking approach is the concept of learning from best practice, and this approach seeks to improve practice as a consequence of a detailed analysis of the practices used in successful organizations, which are then introduced into an organization wishing to improve success. Therefore, benchmarking can be advocated as a means of allowing managers to improve management of their elite sports systems by understanding how others' successful systems operate. Benchmarking analyzes the discrete work processes involved in a range of business systems in an attempt to identify the most effective operating practices from organizations that perform similar work functions. Internal is a comparison among similar operations within one's own organization. It can be competitive, so that there's a comparison with the best of the direct competitors. Functional, a comparison of methods with those of companies with similar processes in the same function outside one's industry. And the generic process, a comparison of work processes with other who have innovative exemplary work businesses or processes. This is the form of benchmarking that was chosen, and benchmarking is the continuous process of measuring products, services, and practices against the toughest competitors or those companies recognized as industry leaders. Benchmarking can be considered as a structured process that leads to understanding of superior performance and the delivery of services and products. Organizations can use benchmarking to improve productivity, service design, and to identify new opportunities. Benchmarking contributes to strategic planning, process analysis, and improvement in organizational change. Benchmarking is the search for industry best practices that leads to superior performance. And finally, change needs to be made within the initiating organization in order to take advantage of the learning from the benchmarking process, which should subsequently be evaluated and reviewed. Benchmarking will reduce learning costs as it can provide detailed insight into the nature of successful organizational processes, how these are linked to and best integrated into an organization, as well as why and how these affect the organization's performance. Benchmarking is based on the comparison of one organization with that of another. The use of benchmarking in order to learn about the processes that may improve the management and delivery of elite sports system. Using a project management system helps to establish a systematic approach at all kinds of events. Similarly, the importance of project management is discussed in the framework of coordination and the efficient, effective management of events. A bottom-up process uses perception to drive action. In business terms, the interactions that we are involved in on a daily basis, our perception drives what we do, our action. So a bottom-up approach is slow but more sustainable than the top-down. It respects that challenges will emerge, but so will new ideas and new solutions. Conversely, a top-down approach refers to perception that is driven by cognition, and top-down approaches, prior knowledge and or expectations are used to guide processing. Bottom-up approaches piece together data until a bigger picture arrives. So a top-down approach is fast but volatile, and a top-down approach doesn't really allow for, it tends to be management driven, while a bottom-up approach empowers the workers. In a control case approach, the first method is to collect data for cities with similar structure and size in the same macroeconomy for a certain period. The average development of the other cities builds the reference case. The second method is to predict the control case, is to look at the growth path. In other words, its long-term development. The control case can be determined by trend extrapolation. The event legacy would be the difference between the control case trend and the event case. The shortcoming of this method is, again, that non-event related circumstances can deviate from the trend. In the events industry, impact studies are undertaken for a variety of purposes. Frequently, they consider elements of cost and benefit analysis concerning the event in comparison to income generation and visitor expenditure. Events give greater economic life to the host city and raises profile by developing employment through increased tourism potential, additional trade and business development. It is important for the event manager to realize this potential situation and to identify and manage both positive and negative impacts resulting from the event. A positive improvement increases the standard of living for the city's residents and is therefore a positive impact for the host community. Events provide the host city with great economic resources, which can leave a lasting legacy to the local community. In addition, local businesses rely on mega events and festivals to boost their income for the year. For many, it may well be the icing on the cake. Portuguese is the main language in Brazil, and the World Cup in 2014 and Olympic Games in 2016 led to a new governmental program, Criança Global, which was created to expand educational opportunities for school children, including requiring public schools in Rio de Janeiro to teach English as a second language. With 350 teachers hired and trained in 2014, there was a positive impact for 100,000 primary school children and students. Also, 19 towns received funds from the government program during 2016. The impact of the World Cup for Brazil should be examined in two ways, positive and negative. The following case study will analyze the impact on the nation and the local people by considering the economic, social, cultural, and environmental aspects. An economic impact that's positive. Brazil built 12 sports stadiums before the World Cup, and many new extensions for the event were built at the same time. These constructions increased employment and provided job opportunities for local people, especially in the construction industry. During the event, there were lots of visitors traveling to Brazil. The visitor expenditure brought money to the local economy through tourism-related services, which included travel, accommodations, restaurants, and shopping. The expenditure brought revenue to local people in order to hold a great event. Brazil's government had to invest in infrastructure, which provided long-term promotional benefits and tax revenues after the event. The negative impacts included increased income, creating price inflation on goods and services. As the lower classes did not gain economic benefit, increasing prices created financial pressures due to higher living costs. Meanwhile, increased spending by the government during preparation for the event led to tax increases for local people. Tax is one of the most important incomes for governments. It is important for the event manager to realize this potential situation and to identify and manage both positive and negative impacts resulting from the event. Major sporting events fit more or less well in the development plans of host cities. The structures required for the event structures, affect the city development in 4 ways. The strategy of building an event legacy starts with the decision for a specific event. First, major sporting events differ in terms of structures required, and cities differ in terms of structures they can provide. The strategy focuses on the additional structures an event creates and the long-term need for these structures during the candidature process. That's one of the reasons the city commissioner, the sport commissioner for the city of Corpus Christi, they have decided that one of the main structures they want to build upon is the fact that we have water here. And with that water, there's less structural infrastructure that you have to create. Second, some required structures obligate measures as well as some optional measures will be provided. By means of the optional measures, the city aims to be strategically best positioned in the bid competition. Therefore, these measures may not be sustainable during the preparation for the event. The third is the obligate structure is set up, how optional measures can be embedded to improve particular location factors. And during the event, all event structures are present. So some event structures disappear or lose intensity, but others exist for a long time after the event. There are 6 event structures usually preserved after an event. Infrastructure obviously means the sport infrastructure for competition and training, but also the general infrastructure of a city, such as the airports, roads, telecommunications, hotels, housing for the athletes, the media and officials, and entertainment facilities, fairgrounds, parks, etc. All infrastructure left after an event should fit into the city's development. Today, temporary constructions can avoid negative legacies such as oversized and extraneous facilities. The host population gains knowledge and skills from staging a major sporting event. Employees and volunteers achieve skills and knowledge in event organization, human resource management, security, hospitality, service, and etc. Spectators and volunteers learn to use public transportation and are acquainted with environmental projects. They also gain greater knowledge about the history of their city and country, culture, and other issues. And major sporting events have tremendous symbolic significance and form. They reposition or solidify the image of a city, region, and country. Usually, events create a positive imagery, and the city and politicians can bask in its reflected glory. The negative incidences, such as a bomb attack, hooligans, organizational shortcomings, or just bad weather, also influence the image of the host. Not only negative incidents, but also general bad attributes can be transported through a mega event to millions of potential visitors, customers, or business partners, exaggerated nationalism or unfair spectator behavior spoils hospitality, and poverty. And crime creates doubts about a potential tourism destination. The mega sport events give politicians a common vision to gain international prestige. Citizens are emotionally involved, and private industry is inspired to welcome an extraordinary and worldwide event. The pride of hosting such an event creates local identification, vision, and motivation. International sport federations, media, politics, etc. need to cooperate in order to stage an event successfully. Their interaction creates networks. In general, events improve political networks, such as close partnership with the central government. In particular, the greater knowledge of sport networks between politicians and sport federation and the image of being a sports city increases the affiliation to sport. Grassroots coaching programs, facilities for schools, sport for all, and additional sport events may be the result. Major sporting events produce cultural ideas, cultural identity, and cultural products. Opening ceremonies especially include a cultural, artistic aspect, which is a condensed display of the host country's culture. A positive cultural image increases awareness, new infrastructure, and additional tourist products. Combined with the soft factor of better service quality, have a great potential to increase tourism in the long term. Obviously, there are 6 sites of a city that are affected by a change of location factor. The tourism site is affected by event structures, such as the infrastructure of the tourist attractions, hotels, transport, etc. The image, knowledge and service industry, and culture. The Congress site is affected by event structures such as the infrastructure, the Congress Center, the upper class hotels, image, knowledge, and event organization and bidding, as well as the culture. The fair site is affected by event structure such as the infrastructure, the fairgrounds, the hotels, the transport, image and knowledge, and networks to the lobby for the site. The site for better living is affected by event structures such as infrastructure, the transportation, pedestrian zones, entertainment facilities, parks, etc., emotions, and culture. The business site is affected by event structures such as the general infrastructure, the knowledge, organization, service, and security, as well as skilled labor and image. The sport event site is affected by event structures such as general infrastructure, the sport structure, knowledge, such as the organization and bidding, event skilled workforce, and image of being a sports city, and emotions and networks. And lastly, the economic growth based on improved locations does not directly appear as being event related, and therefore it's difficult to measure. Here also the bottom-up approach is insufficient in providing further help. However, the findings bring new arguments to the discussion whether major sporting events lead to productive investment to develop a city. The measurement of a legacy should start with the changes events create. A demand-driven output of an event has to be considered as the economic impact. The changes of the city's productivity through a change of location factors also have to be considered in this discussion. However, if and how a better location really contributes to higher productivity in a long term becomes visible only years after the event is ended. It is therefore difficult to measure these effects because they are not isolated from other regular development. The second issue which becomes clear is that there are always investments in structures that are not needed for a particular group in a long term. The question is to what extent these investments are needed and how important this group is. The better the event factors and event-related infrastructure fits in the long-term development of a different location of a city, the better is the staging of a major sporting event. And these are my references. I thank you for joining me today. I look forward to talking with you again. Have a great day.